We're back with part three of this week's Shabbat services for September 19th, 2020, and Tishri 1, 5781, the first day of 5781. Happy New Year, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets, um, and we're going to continue with this week's Shabbat services. And we're going to move on with the Haftarah this week. And this week's Haftarah is First Samuel chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 10. And also Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 1 to 19. So we're going to start with First Samuel chapter 1 through chapter 2, verse 10. A barren woman's petition is granted. Now there was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim of the hill country of Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. He had two wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah was childless. Now this man used to go up from his town every year to worship and to sacrifice to Adonai Sabaoth in Shiloh. The two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were Kohanim of Adonai there. Then on the designated day Elkanah would sacrifice and give portions to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters, but to Hannah he would give only one portion, even though he loved Hannah. For Adonai had closed her womb. Her rival would taunt her bitterly to provoke her, because Adonai had closed her womb. So it was year after year, whenever she went up to the house of Adonai, that she would provoke her, so she wept and would not eat. Then her husband Elkanah would say to her, Hannah, why are you crying? Why won't you eat? Why is your heart so sad? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? After eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah got up. Now Eli the Kohen was sitting on his seat by the doorpost of the temple of Adonai. While her soul was bitter, she prayed to Adonai and wept. So she made a vow and said, Adonai Sabaoth, if you will indeed look upon the affliction of your handmaid, remember me, and not forget your handmaid, but grant your handmaid a son, then I will give him to Adonai all the days of his life, and no razor will ever touch his head. It came to pass, as she prayed long before Adonai, that Eli was watching her mouth. Now Hannah was praying in her heart. Only her lips were moving, but her voice could not be heard. So Eli thought she was drunk. Then Eli said to her, How long will you be drunk? Get rid of your wine. But in response, Hannah said, No, my lord, I'm a woman with an oppressed spirit. I haven't been drinking wine or beer. Instead, I've been pouring out my soul before Adonai. Don't consider your handmaid a wicked woman, for out of my great anguish and grief, I've been praying until now. Then Eli responded, Go in shalom, and may the God of Israel grant your petition that you asked of him. May your maidservant find favor in your eyes, she said. So the woman went her way. She ate, and her countenance was no longer dejected. They rose up early in the morning and worshipped before Adonai, then went back to their home to Ramah. Then Elkanah was intimate with his wife Hannah, and Adonai remembered her. So it came to pass, at the turn of the year, that Hannah conceived and gave birth to a son. She called him Samuel, because I have asked Adonai for him. When the man Elkanah and all his household went up to offer the annual sacrifice to Adonai and to fulfill his vow, Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, When the child is weaned, I will bring him, so he may appear before Adonai and stay there forever. So her husband Elkanah said to her, Do what seems best to you. Stay until you have weaned him. Only may Adonai establish his word. So the woman stayed home and nursed her son until she weaned him. When she had weaned him, she took him up with her, along with 3 bowls, 1 ephah of flour, and a jar of wine, and brought him to the house of Adonai in Shiloh, while the child was still young. After they slaughtered the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. "It's me, my lord," she said. "As your soul lives, my lord, I am the woman that stood by you here, praying to Adonai. For this boy I prayed, and Adonai has granted me my petition that I asked of him. So I in turn dedicate him to Adonai. As long as he lives, he is dedicated to Adonai." Then he bowed in worship there before Adonai. In the second chapter, um, verse 1 to 10, is Hannah's prayer of exaltation. Then Hannah prayed and said, "My heart exults in Adonai. My horn is lifted high in Adonai. I smile wide over my enemies, for I rejoice in your salvation. There is none holy as Adonai, for there is none besides you, nor is there any rock like our God. Boast no more so proudly. Insolence comes out of your mouth, for Adonai is the all-knowing God, and by him deeds are weighed. The bows of the mighty are broken, but the stumbling are girded with strength. Those full hire themselves for bread, but those starving hunger no more. Even the barren gives birth to 7, but she with many sons languishes. Adonai causes death and makes alive. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. Adonai makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and also lifts up. He raises the helpless from the dust. He lifts the needy from the dunghill to make them sit with nobles, granting them a seat of honor. For the earth's pillars were Adonai's, and he has set the world on them. He guards the steps of his godly ones, but the wicked are silenced in darkness. For one does not prevail by might. Those who oppose Adonai will be shattered. He thunders against them in heaven. He judges the ends of the earth. He gives strength to his king, exalting the horn of his anointed one. So in both the Torah, when we saw what happened with Sarah and Abraham, and now we see with Elkanah and Hannah, these are both stories of remembrance, how God had remembered his faithful. And so we saw the birth of Isaac, and we also saw the birth here of Samuel. Like Sarah, Hannah was also childless for many years, and God remembered her, and saw her plight, um, and and saw her sincerity, and 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 honored her with a child, um, because she honored God and also made a pledge, um, and she kept her pledge too. Samuel was a man of God, as we know. And in that second chapter, the Song of Hannah, she's giving praise to God as she has taken her son to be trained in the priesthood. And actually, Samuel was the last judge. When we talk about the time of the judges, he was the very last judge, but he was also a prophet, very powerful prophet. And he is the one who anointed King Saul and also David. So that is Samuel. And in the second reading of the Haftorah is Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 1 to 19. Saving the remnant. Thus says Adonai, the people surviving the sword found grace in the wilderness where I gave Israel rest. From afar Adonai appeared to me. Yes, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore I have drawn you with loving kindness. Again I will build you, so you will be rebuilt, virgin Israel. Again you will take up your tambourines as ornaments and go out to dances of merrymakers. Again you will plant vineyards on the hills of Samaria. Planters will plant and use them, for there will be a day when watchmen will call out in the hill country of Ephraim, Arise, let us go up to Zion, to Adonai our God, for thus says Adonai, sing aloud with joy for Jacob. Shout with the chief of the nations. Proclaim, give praise, and say, Adonai, save your people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north country, and I will gather them from the ends of the earth. Among them the blind and the lame, the pregnant together with she who is in labor with child. A great throng will return here. With weeping and supplications they will come. I will bring them, leading them to walk by streams of water on a straight path where they will not stumble. For I am Israel's father, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear the word of Adonai, O nations, and declare it in the distant islands, and say, He who scattered Israel will gather and watch over him, as a shepherd does his flock. For Adonai has ransomed Jacob. He redeemed him from the hand of one stronger than he. They will come and sing on Zion's height, radiant over the bounty of Adonai, over the grain, the wine, the oil, and the young of the flock. Their life will be like a watered garden, and they will never languish again. Then will the virgin rejoice in the dance, both young men and old men together, for I will turn their mourning into joy, and I will comfort them and make them rejoice. Out of their sorrow I will fill the soul of the Kohanim with fatness, and my people will be satisfied with my goodness. It is a declaration of Adonai. And grief turned to joy. This is Rachel's heart verse. Thus says Adonai, a voice is heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children because they are no more. Thus says Adonai, restrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work will be rewarded. It is a declaration of Adonai when they will return from the land of the enemy. So there is hope for your future. It is a declaration of Adonai when your children will return to their own territory. I indeed heard Ephraim grieving. You have disciplined me. I was disciplined like an untrained calf. Restore me, and I will return, for you are Adonai my God. For after I returned, I repented, and after that I was instructed. I struck my thigh. I was ashamed and also humiliated, for I bore the disgrace of my youth. I'm going to continue this. I know we have just a 19, but I am going to. This is verse 19. Is Ephraim a precious son to me? Is he a delightful child? For as often as I spoke against him, I still certainly remember him. Therefore, my heart yearns for him. I will surely have compassion on him. It is a declaration of Adonai. I'm going to just finish this section. Like I said, it goes actually up to 29. Erect road markers, set up signposts, set your heart towards the highway, the way by which you traveled. Return, O Virgin Israel, return to your cities. How long will you waver, O backsliding daughter? For Adonai has created a new thing on earth. A woman surrounds a man. Thus says Adonai Sabaoth, the God of Israel. Yet again will they use this expression in the land of Judah and in its cities when I will return them from exile. Adonai bless you, O dwelling of righteousness, O mountain of holiness. Judah and all its cities will dwell there together, the farmer and those who go about with flocks. For I will satisfy the weary soul, and every languishing soul will refresh. At this point I awoke and looked around, and my sleep was sweet to me. Behold, days are coming. It is a declaration of Adonai when I will slow the house of Israel when I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of man and the seed of beast. Now, just as I have watched over them to uproot and to pull down, to overthrow, to destroy, and to bring disaster, then I will watch over them to build and to plant, says Adonai. In those days they will no longer say, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are blunted. Rather, each will die for his own iniquity. If anyone eats the sour grapes, his own teeth will be blunted. So again, as we look at this, one of the major things of Rosh Hashanah is remembrance. And on this day, the existence of every being is being examined and scrutinized by Adonai. Each creation passes before him and he decides their fate for the coming year. So, this section of the Haftarah in Jeremiah begins with God's eternal love for the nation of Israel. They were the surviving remnant who escaped Pharaoh's sword in Egypt and who followed him into the desert to become his people. Now, in the dark time, Adonai promised that they would yet return to their land. The joy in their return and union with Adonai would entirely over overcap or eclipse the suffering that they had endured. The day would come when the people would joyfully work the Holy Land and ascend to Jerusalem in jubilation and thanksgiving. And it's also there was an ingathering of the exiles that was going to take place as well. The the people, the Jews who were driven to the very ends of the earth, will finally return home, and not one single one would be left behind. The process of return would take a very long period of time, um, usually would become very swift and smooth compared to a woman conceiving and giving birth immediately thereafter. Um, and they would also realize the time of Mashiach had come. And the world would look on amazement as this story, the Jewish story, comes full circle. And the same God who scattered this nation in every part of the globe would be bringing them all back home. And this is happening today. Aliyah is happening today. Um, and some of us have come home in our heart, and others are actually going home to Israel physically. Um, but there's a return, whether it be physically, spiritually, as well. When we look at the section, A Mother's Cry, the Lord hearing Rachel weeping for her children, she refuses to be comforted, for her children are not. And he is asking, the Lord is saying, restrain your voice from weeping, um, for there is reward for your work. And, the children will come back to their borders, come back from the land of the enemy. And simply speaking, the children for whom Rachel refused to be consoled are the tribe of Ephraim, the grandson of Rachel, who formed the ruling class, the kingdom of the 10 tribes known as Israel. And they got the northern kingdom of Israel actually got carried off into Assyria, and then the other descendants of Rachel, the tribe of Benjamin, resided in the territory of Judea, and they had 70 years of exile in Babylon. So the descendants of Joseph, the tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim, would all but disappear. They became the 10 lost tribes. They were scattered to the ends of the earth. So this is why Rachel, that verse of Rachel weeping for her children, because they were not. Um, so, and God said to her, "You have defended well. There is a reward for your work and your righteousness. It is given." Whatever the explanation, Rachel's cry paid off. Her children would eventually return. And after enduring the suffering of exile, wayward Ephraim had already reconsidered and was deeply ashamed of his sinful ways. So God, um, Adonai, felt the repentance of his children and remembered his children. And again, in this season, in the days of awe and teshuvah, um, God remembers all of us and will redeem all of us through Yeshua. Absolutely. And that ends the Haftorah portion. So we have now covered the Torah and the Haftorah for this week's Shabbat. And I'm going to end this section with prayer, and then we will take a short break and then come back for the second part of Shabbat services with the Brit Kadashah and also doing Holy Communion this week. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, we thank you. We thank you for your Torah and your Haftorah, and your word is just so incredible to us. On this brand new day of 5781, we look forward to moving forward with a clean heart, repentant heart, coming to you, coming back to you, and focused on you. We thank you for your word, and we thank you for in your word, we see how you remember your people, your faithful people. We want to be that faithful people. We love you. We honor you. We praise you and adore you. In the mighty name of Yeshua, Jesus. Amen and amen. And take a short break, and we will come back for the next section of Shabbat services.